The forge wakes like a storm in a room, so you set the horn lamp on the anvil's heel until a warm coin of light lands, where iron teaches hands to forget how skin behaves. The tuer sighs, the firepot grins, Clinker remembers every confession men tried to burn. A rack of tongues leans like a choir with scarred throats. A pail of water sweats beside the slack tub as if ashamed of its temper. The bellows creak in a meter that would be prayer, if prayer smelled of coal. You lay your palm on the anvil's face as if oak and iron could borrow a pulse. Then you hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise themselves before mouths can call a burn. The price of craft. Apron on and tied, no bare feet, cuffs shut, tongues kept, slack tub covered, quench clear. No water under oil, vinegar, honey, and ash ready, bellows steady. The master smith nods, smaller in the right way. The apprentice blinks, eager the way boys are before heat teaches. The herb wife rests a basket on the bench, like a pause nobody wishes to pay for. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that brings you drills and receipts, not heroics. And in the comments, give me your 7-word shop law you'd actually nail by the door. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongs kept, quench clear. I'll pin the plainest one and carry it to the next forge where iron hires memory. You begin with the apron because pride hates cloth. A linen smock soaked in sweat becomes a fuse. Wool that smells of lanolin becomes a shield. Leather with a good past becomes a door. The apprentice reaches for the hammer with sleeves laughing open. You turn him by the shoulder. Point to cuffs shut, and knot his shirt the way a midwife knots a prayer. The master ties his own apron higher when he sees you post the card. Old men copy children when the rule is nailed where their knuckles live. Tongs are verbs. You walk the rack with the apprentice's mouth shut and his eyes bright. Wolf jaw for round, flat bit for plate, V-bit for square, scroll tongs that learn to forgive impatience. You hang a second card where wrists will bruise it hourly. Tongs kept, no hand on red. He grins as if you had told him he would live. He will if his memory can outstare iron's color. Fire is an alphabet. You push coke into a cave and teach the boy to read color like scripture. Dull cherry is apology, bright cherry is promise, orange is intention, yellow is danger, white is treason, and today you will not go there. Bellows steady lands on a peg beside the lever, because men who slam their lungs against heat invent surprises that surgeons have to name later. The bellows man, usually the one the village calls old, keeps rhythm like a metronome whose hymn is not now, not yet, now. Then the sound that makes everyone lie to themselves, spit. A bar comes out of the pot with scale spale spitting from its skin like wasps, and the apprentice leans for the look of bright and the feel of begin. A fleck hops under his cuff and tries to write mine on his wrist. Cuffs shut saves him from learning who owns pain. The master's knuckles do not move. He has long stopped teaching with shouts. He points to the horn lamp, then to vinegar, honey, and ash ready, then to the bench, where the herb wife already has a cloth steeped in cool water and a pot of honey big as a sermon. Scale teaches faster than catechisms. You make the boy hold the tongs and breathe while the herb wife paints honey on a coin-sized welt. Why honey? He asks, because children are scientists until adults pay them to be poets. Because thieves don't like to live where sweetness insists, she says, then smooths a second line of cool vinegar around the hard ring where heat still talks. A pinch of sifted ash on the floor keeps the pot stable. Ash is for fires that want to come back, she murmurs. He nods, and his nod is not youthful. He owns the lesson now. Quench confessions are the reason you posted quench clear. No water under oil in letters big enough that even heroism can sound them out. The last man to forget it died with steam in his mouth. Oil on water is a promise to grief. Water beneath oil is a bomb with excellent manners. The master tips the quench barrel with a toe until you see water sulk beneath oil. He drains it into the slack tub, refills, tests with a scrap, and nods. The apprentice watches in the way. That means he might live long enough to teach boredom. A village thinks the smith deals only in sword and shoe. You list the tenor of their orders in chalk, because abstraction burns more frequently than iron. Hinge, nail, clasp, buckle, chain, hook, scroll, pivot. For each, you hang the sentence that saves hands from meaning well. No bare feet, because a rivet does not care. Cuffs shut, because scale is quicker than remorse. Apron tied, because tallow loves linen too much. Tongs kept, because brightness is a liar. The master prints his initials on each card with a grudging, useful pride. The first bad day is always the day a man sweats into a quench. He forged a spindle for a miller's sluice, forgot his elbow had skin and his wrist had a story, and thrust the hot bar into the tub where water hissed an oath that means hurry. Steam bit his forearm as if the devil had invented soup. Labeling the tub slack tub covered when it sleeps is how you prevent this for others. Writing bellows steady is how you prevented it at least twice here. You sit the man on a stool, soak linen in cool water, then in vinegar. Then, when the hand stops planning, you paint honey slow. The herb wife's comfrey leaves sleep in a bowl and will be allowed to behave like leaves later, not now. Now is for stopping yesterday. The apprentice does what saves more lives than the master's talent. He keeps the tongs on the hot end and the handle in his hand. He learns the patience of drawing down without losing temper. He learns the rhythm of hammer with a wrist that knows it is made of meat. He learns to like the sound iron makes when it gives without arguing. He learns to set the edge's shadow on the anvil face instead of on his own knuckles. He applauds quietly the first time Orange listens to him. Pride is the only fire you can quench by staring. The guild arrives with its rulebook that loves quotes more than fingers. You set the horn lamp on its spine until a coin of light warms the margin where useful things grow. Apron on and tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, slack tub covered. Quench clear, no water under oil, vinegar, honey, and ash ready, bellows steady. You copy the sentences into the book. An elder looks at the simplicity and calls it vulgar. The herb wife points at the boy's quiet wrist and calls it mercy. The elder signs vulgarity is what prevents sorrow from becoming a folk song. Nothing in a forge kills so politely as scale in an eye. You hang a scrap of linen above the water pail where hands must bruise it. Eyes rinsed first, don't rub. A man forgets and wipes, pressing bright grit deeper into wet flesh. The surgeon lowers his voice as if telling a secret, turns the lid with the care he saves for wives' hands, and teases the black flake to the edge. Do not bless your eye with your knuckles, he says. He hands the man a cup. You can cry now. The man laughs and obeys. He will see well enough to hold a grandchild later. That is what this channel prefers to fund. For simplicity's sake, you post 3 cards in 3 heights. At eye, don't rub, rinse at chest, cuffs shut, apron tied, at thigh, no bare feet. Humans learn where they are touched. The apprentice becomes priest of these stations by accident, rapping the anvil's horn with a hammer face whenever someone forgets. 1 rap for cuffs, 2 for apron, 3 for shoes. The forge acquires its own silence hour in miniature, a quarter glass at noon when no bar leaves the fire, and boys only rinse and tie and breathe. The bellows man smiles. He likes saving people by telling air what to do, then the big wrist lesson. Weld. The master sprinkles flux like penance. The coke sulks. The joint brightens to that color men wish were applaudable. You say every sentence you hung as if it were new, tongs kept, cuffs shut, apron tied, bellows steady, and watch 2 edges become one without spilling white. The apprentice closes his mouth after the first spark kisses his jaw under safe cloth. I thought it would shout, he admits. Good welds don't have to, the master says. Burn scars from weld failures become letters on the memory of anyone with a forge. You are bankrupting that alphabet on purpose. Guilds like applause. You hand them receipts instead. The steward writes a new page on the guild slate. Shops that saved us. And lists the armorer who refused to sell lances to dukes. The farrier who reset nails gentle. The herb wife with honey and vinegar and restraint. The surgeon with a bowl and enough quiet. The smith who kept quench clear, the apprentice who wraps the horn for cuffs. The town reads the list during market, not pillory, and claps once like lids. Fame can be born of tying knots. Put the herb bed near the water because you want burns to meet comfrey before rumor meets brimstone. You hammer garden sown for wounds over the scullery door. Yarrow for bleeding, comfrey for later, plantain for bites, Honey and vinegar for now, ash for bragging fires, cold water for everything you can arrest before you call it a crime. The herb wife measures time by breath instead of bells. The apprentice writes "cool" on a scrap and hangs it over the pail with a dignity that makes elders look away. A visiting lord parades bare forearms like proof. You hand him an apron that smells of a man who made hinges last week and tie cuffs shut against his will. He jokes. You point at the boy's coin of honey drying under linen. He jokes less. He holds the tongues like a newborn statement. The master lets him draw a heat and asks him to put the bar back when his wrists wobble. The Lord obeys because embarrassment is cheaper than surgery. The village will remember this better than any sermon on humility. Your forge becomes a public post for the town's new habit. You nail copies of your rules where wrists live, at the smithy door, above the quench, beside the bellows lever next to the rack. You hang a small card by the anvil that simply reads, "Wait." People think you meant iron. You meant everything. Mid-bench, now you. Drop your own 7-word smithy law in the comments. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear, and tap the bell so part 2 reaches you before any boy tries to bless his eye with his patience. The afternoon smells like tempered patience. You watch the apprentice lift a bright bar with tongs, set it on a tool that has outlived 3 men, and hammer down until yellow argues, orange listens, and red concedes. He reheats, waiting at shoulder as if Boers taught him. He quenches in oil because water screams at good steel, and he sets the blade back in the straw like a promise. He will have scars, every smith does, but yours will read like sentences that saved people, not single words that complete ballads. The physician from the next parish arrives to scoff and leaves writing. He sees your cards, hears your raps, watches the herb wife cool and paint and bind, tastes the honey, smells the vinegar, asks which saint wrote the quench rule, and copies it into his book as if he invented it. Good theft travels faster than sermons. Knights will complain to him about ointments. He will tell them about shirts. Twilight teaches the forge how to be a church and not a theater. The master hangs his hammer by the face. The apprentice rolls the bellows slower. The slack tub gets covered. The honey pot is refilled. The ash pail is sifted. The anvil's face receives the rag like a blessing. The rack counts tongs like a friar counts beads. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongs kept, slack tub covered, quench clear, no water under oil, vinegar, honey, and ash ready, bellows steady. The sentences look less like rules and more like the town's handwriting. And the burns? The whole reason you nailed these sentences low? They become memory, not destiny. The coin on the boy's wrist heals flat and early because fire did not get to write a paragraph. The master's old round scar on his forearm stays his and is not inherited by any godson. The herb wife's bench stays ordinary because nobody begged her to turn miracle into guilt. The surgeon reads names at the gale 1 hour and plants comfrey the next because your town chose to write pain into grammar before it had to become a song. This is where I ask for the easy currency that lets me keep teaching hard thrift. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 2 lands before any Duke of Brilliant Ideas convinces your armorer to sand the future into lances. In the comments, leave the 7-word shop law. You will hammer chest high where wrists live, apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear. And say continue if you want us to walk through apprenticeships paid in scars, guild inquiries written in ash, honey, and receipts, village fires turned dull on purpose, and the surgeon's bowl we keep hot so stories don't have to be. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the stupidly effective miracle that beat knives, pillories, and boar faces alike. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths make more work for embers. The week the chartered apprentices arrive, the yard learns what patience actually costs, so you set the horn lamp on the tool rack until a warm coin of light lands where new wrists reach for iron, as if pain were a ballot. The chalkboard already lists their names under the verbs you posted last time: find, hold, turn, hang. But now you add a second column at mouth height, a ledger of prevention: apron tied, cuffs shut, tongs kept, quench clear, no water under oil, bellows steady, Vinegar and honey ready, ash sifted. Each name gets a chalk tick only when a hand touches the card and repeats the line aloud. The master rolls his eyes and then does it too. Tradition is simply boredom that finally agreed to be useful. Apprenticeships are paid in scars and interruptions. You stage both on purpose. The first interruption happens when a boy tries to bless his eye with patience, and you rap the anvil horn once, sending the reflex through the floorboards the way church bells send guilt through rafters. He rinses it once, not twice, not late. The surgeon nods from the door and vanishes again, because prevention freed him to grow comfrey in the sun. The first scar happens to memory only. A flake of scale kisses leather instead of skin, because cuffs shut owns his wrists. He stops calling your board fussy and begins to call it a wage. Guild inquiry is ash, honey, and receipts with witnesses, not fireworks. At the bench you set horn on the elder's ledger until the coin of light warms the margin where your sentences traveled last week. A journeyman with a bright burn coin on his palm admits he dipped too fast. Quench clear was posted, he did not bruise it with his eyes. He pays the surgeon's bowl from his own purse and signs, then pins a caution on the rack above the quench, with the gilded humility apprentices remember better than sermons. The herb wife lists honey by weight and vinegar by ladle. The steward returns her coin without haggling, because the guild voted herbs first, later guilt into the minutes. Village fires turn dull on purpose when iron becomes a teacher of kitchens. You carry a smaller board. Cool first, cover sparks, ash sifted, water kept, to 3 cottages where bread will meet peels near coals. Children whom you used to admire for throwing now pour water because you taught them to tap enough on the stool and then ask them to carry a dipper here. One woman posts no bare feet over her hearth after stepping on a nail someone else forgot. She reads it like a talisman and thanks you with barley, which you accept because gratitude is policy when it buys habit. Heat collects courage and carelessness alike when the first real failure tests your kit. The master draws a weld at bright orange, the bellows man keeps rhythm, the bar hisses honesty, the apprentice reaches to help a fraction early. A fang of white jumps and kisses the back of his hand through thin wool. He sucks his breath, but not his fingers because you slap don't rub. Rinse eyes beside apron tied earlier, and boys wage reflex against rules if rules are low enough. The herb wife speaks as if reading psalms to the wrist. Cool water, then cool vinegar, then honey like dawn arriving across a field. Ash waits for smoke, not for skin. You print the accident into the apprentice book with a pen both elders sign. Where, horn. When, bright orange. Why, help first, think later. Rule, tongues kept. Response, cool, vinegar, honey, no ash until heat is done wanting. Later, comfrey, bandage, workaround. The book is not a shame ledger, it is the village's scar map, written in present tense so memory cannot pretend destiny. A second boy runs his fingers along the letters and looks older without theatrics. He takes the tongs as if they were verbs instead of ornaments. Honey becomes scandal the first time a duke's man tastes it and declares it a luxury that weakens men. You hang vinegar, honey, and ash, ready higher, not lower, and invite the messenger to hold the boy's clean wrist while he reads. He cannot pretend to admire burns from the safe end of a sentence any more than he can pretend lances are sensible near bore. You give him a spoon and let sweetness prove it prefers healing to praise. He takes a pot back anyway. The duke will use it for bread and call himself a physician. You can live with that arithmetic. Receipts thicken like salves when men stop performing pain. The surgeon now writes both bowl and herb garden into the guild minutes. The herb wife invoices ash the same way she invoices nettles. The smith keeps soap near quench and writes hands washed into the corner of your board. The cooper prints receipts kept on the stave of every pitch barrel. The armorer pins his own lances, no above his door where boys can bruise it before dukes arrive. A farrier draws hoof diagrams in ink that still smells of vinegar and lists nails placed as if Melody learned to count. Everyone naps better. Your town should be paid for naps. The fires you fight next are not in the forge, they are in the lanes. A thatch goes to lesson because a mother boiled oil in an angry pan. You bring horn to the gate and nail clear quench. No water under oil to her door, with a kindness heavy enough to equal shame. You pour a pan of ash into the trough of habit and teach the children to throw sand at greed, not stories at one another. The neighbors who used to auction blame bring buckets before they bring opinions, because your cards are above their basins and their wrists have learned to be literate. Burned scars become lifelong when we pretend they are curriculum. You hang no ordeal talk at the bench where old men like to pronounce the virtues of blisters. The master obeys by accident the first time, then on purpose. He shows instead the 3 bright coins on his skin and tells the verbs that minted them: reached, wiped, rushed. He flips his palm and shows you an older line most apprentices misinterpret as a dragon's kiss. He names it a rivet, not a monster, and explains the habit that prevents that notch. No bare feet. Story becomes drill when vocabulary is posted low. Apprentice wages are paid in boredom and barley, so you teach the apprentice's mother where to pin apron tied over her own hearth, and no bare feet by the door her children forget. The village women ask the herb wife to sell small cards for kitchens. She invents a wreath of forged nails and comfrey for those who buy 3. You never meant to sell merchandise. Your cards do it without your permission. That is how reform survives its author, by making money for helpful people. Guild inquiry turns to its cleanest page, thanks, and you drag the apprentice forward to write his own name below it because gratitude is cheaper than scars. He writes big, then rubs it out and writes small because he used to admire himself and now admires wrists more. The elder, who once called your lines vulgar nods, he knows he would be less alive without vulgarity. He hates admitting it. He likes living. The church joins the kit with a practical blessing. The priest pins names learned on a small board by the font, listing apprentices by trade so meals find them while they recover and work finds them when hands are ready. He adds recipes for prevention to the parish book. Cool water, cool vinegar, honey, ash later, comfrey once fire sleeps. He rides to a neighboring cure and steals your sentences on purpose. Pillories, boar hunts, roads, and forges now agree on one grammar. Saints like it. The forge keeps its micro-silence hour, a quarter glass where no bar leaves the fire, and men touch only water, linen, buckles, buckles, buckles. The bellows man, whose knees talk more than he does, hums the road chorus to stop time from pretending to be a boss. Board, loop, peg, cap, move. Boys learn to love counting when it extends life. A visiting poet decides he prefers soup. You carry horn to a house with a baby because the first fire scars in any village are toddlers who borrow kettles. You nail cool first, cover sparks over the hearth, no bare feet by the door, apron tied where a mother's elbow must bruise it. She reads each aloud like a door lintel charm and hands you a loaf with your initials cut into it. You take it because bread is how policy is supposed to taste. The apprentice's burn coin stops complaining on the 7th day. He wants to take the linen off and admire it. You do not let him. You paint honey again and make him tell you what color iron lies to the fastest. He answers correctly, white. You make him tell the board those colors in order while his hand breathes. Pride stares at the horn lamp and learns patience. He returns to draw, not to display. He will be a boring man. He will save a village. You end the week with the only ritual you trust, at the only height that works. You thump the anvil horn with the hammer's face once for cuffs shut, twice for apron tied, 3 times for no bare feet. You point to the quench and repeat clear. You open the vinegar and honey pots and let smell do some work. You pin the herb wife's wreath above the bench. You make the master read bellows steady and watch his lungs obey. Scarred men are not wiser. They are often simply older. Posted sentences turn older into kinder. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 3 lands before a fashionable cousin sells your armor bench lances again. In the comments, leave the 7-word shop law you will actually nail chest high where wrists live, apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear, and type. Continue if you want to walk guild penalties that turned into gardens, village fires that learned to be dull, the surgeon's ledger when debt tried to rename pain, and the long patience that let an apprentice's scar become a paragraph instead of a career. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the single tool that beat gossip, bandits, and bore. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them, before mouths remember their bravado. The surgeon's ledger is where pain tries to rename itself debt, so you set the horn lamp on the copper's rim until a warm coin of light lands where bowls and numbers must agree. Linen dries in ribbons. Comfrey hangs like green grammar. Vinegar waits in a stone bottle labeled cool first in the herb wife's hand. You hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise before mouths pay the wrong ledger. Bowl hot, water cool. Don't rub. Honey first. Vinegar ring. Ash later. Comfrey once heat sleeps. Names learned. The surgeon nods, the herb wife smiles. The master folds his pride and puts it under the bench with the pegs. The apprentice reads each line aloud and touches the card with his sound hand. That is how futures are purchased. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that lands drills in your feed instead of songs in your scars. And add in the comments your 7-word burn drill you will actually nail over a basin. Cool first, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later. I'll pin the cleanest one and carry it to the next bench before debt opens its mouth. You begin with the bowl, because heat likes to put on its own liturgy. Bowl hot, water cool means 2 hands, one for copper, one for cloth, and a patience that beats scald by a breath. The surgeon warms the vessel like a baker proving a loaf. He does not boil because boiling is theater. He does not chill because chilling is arrogance. The herb wife dips linen into that humble middle where pulses cease to panic. Don't rub, you say to the apprentice, because bodies tell lies to hands when hands hurt. He grins through his teeth and obeys. Honey first. Not ointment, not ashes, not a prayer. The herb wife spreads it with a spoon so clean you can see your doubt in it. Sticky sweetness refuses the old world syllables for sainthood and insists on chemistry instead. Draws, seals, slows. Around the angry coin of shine, the surgeon walks a ring of vinegar, you watching the color turn from interrogative to coherent. Why the ring? The boy asks. Because heat loves borders, the surgeon says, and hates being grateful. He laughs like a man who remembers crying. You let the laugh stay. Ash later lives on the shelf like a reformed gossip. Ash is for smothering fires that want to come back, not for slapping an ego. You teach the boy to sift it, to name the moment when it belongs, after the hiss is gone, after the sting retires, and to keep it patient like a cousin who will not be hired to speak before it's time. He loves this lesson. He has just enough scars to recognize the way habit keeps relatives in the right rooms. Comfrey, once heat sleeps, is an herb wife's treaty with the future. It is for knitting, not for fighting. It is for later, not for now. She wraps green in linen dreams on the far peg while you count the breath between a man and his scream. The apprentice, 8 days from his first bright coin, looks at Comfrey like a promise he may live long enough to appreciate like furniture. That is all you want from him this season. Then, the thing you wrote these rules to prevent. A neighbor arrives carrying a boy whose forearm looks like a map someone spilled. He grabbed a chain that remembered the forge too well. Everyone tries to talk louder than heat. You point to bowl hot, water cool with 2 fingers, then don't rub, then honey first. Voices stand down. The bowl's honesty wins the first minute. The vinegar ring wins the next. The boy's mouth finds adulthood in the third. The herb wife rests Comfrey back on its peg and says, later, not now, with more love than any hymn you've ever heard. Debt tries to push its hand into the bowl. The neighbor's face says, what will this cost more urgently than will he keep his hand? You pin a small card where wrists pay things. Thanks later, not now. And the steward who knows where this copper sits in his ledger places a coin on the table and another in the herb wife's apron and 2 in the surgeon's bowl. He writes paid by the boy's name in the guild minute book before anybody can confuse generosity with interest. The guild discovers the cheapest way to prevent lifelong scars is to buy honey early. Your forge writes a chapter into the village's book of thanks. The armorer brings a note saying he will replace any leather apron burned under your posted rules. The farrier pins a line under nails, placed because it turns out he likes counting the right things. The priest, small on purpose, adds names learned to the parish prayer in a way that does not try to borrow credit for chemistry. The alehouse keeps soup before stories because confusion cannot blow on its own embers while mouths are busy. The surgeon's ledger fills with numbers written in mercy rather than in aftermath. Cooling cloths, 10, honey, 3 pots, vinegar, 2 stone, ash by the basket, comfrey for 2 nights, thanks, 7 lines more than charges this week. He tears a blank in half and writes in a hand better than his training. If you find this thorn later, do not persuade it to stay. He pins it above the bowl. Men love an instruction that trusts them. Their hands have not heard enough of those. Apprentices whisper about whether scars earn respect. You nail no ordeal talk above the bench where elders like to pantomime bravery. The master tells the verbs instead of the outcomes. Reached, rushed, wiped. He admits he learned cuffs shut late and advises tasting rigor younger than he did. The boy brushes his own scar with the ridiculous tenderness of a man making friends with his hand. You allow this private extravagance. Pride has to live somewhere. You bribed it into preferring wrists. The herb wife registers her own insistence into the guild minutes. Honey by weight, not by rumor. She records every spoon and how it kept named hands from becoming named debts. She lists vinegar by ladle for men who mistook winter's laws for summer's kitchen. She adds ash sifted as if it were a hymn. The elder who once called your signs vulgar signs her page without sneer. Vulgarity is what reminds expensive people that survival is not a boutique. A winter cousin of Burns arrives in the form of frostbite on a boy sent too proud into the morning to fetch water. You point to no bare feet by the door, and to apron tied by the hearth, and to cool first above the bowl, and let the herb wife take the boy's hands into her own without rubbing. Honey again, but thinner, vinegar not at all yet, ash later maybe not at all, comfrey not now, time yes. The boy cries apology into his own breath. He leaves with enough fingers to ruin songs and sign ledgers. That is our vocation. The guild votes a small, glorious bureaucracy, scar book. It is not for boasting. It is for verbs and receipts. Men write where, when, why, rule, response, later, and thanks in one column. The next column is for who learned with me. The book becomes a map of a forge that refused to let chronology become destiny. A physician from the next parish steals the form with both hands. Let him. Your forge pins a new card above the quench because someone always arrives who can read danger only in poetry. Steam is a door that closes hands. Men adopt the sentence faster than any rhyme you ever heard under a cross. The bellows man raps it with the liver when someone looks wistful. The steward writes it in the minutes next to lilies because memorials are also for living. A duke's courier returns with a question knotted in banner cloth. Can honey be purchased on Sundays? You answer with the threadbare liberty you prefer to any sermon. Mercy outruns market. The priest nods. He writes honey aloud into a margin. Chemical ethics develop a liturgy. You accidentally invented it with a pot. Mid-bench? Now you, yes you, drop your 7-word basin rule into the comments. Cool first, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later, and tap the bell. So part 4 lands before a clever cousin renames suffering into tuition. The apprentice's coin of Burns softens into a cloud that will agree to be furniture. He forgives the spoon. He loosens the knot around the story he would have used to purchase respect. He asks to run the bellows because steady fits his wrist better than brave. The master hides a grin the way blacksmith happiness always hides. In the plan drawer, your forge lends its grammar to the whole street. The baker posts apron tied and no bare feet over his oven. The cooper pins cool first above pitch. The brewer hangs no water under oil near the fryer. The weaver, smart, asks for don't rub by her dye vats. The herb wife sells wreaths of forged nails and comfrey to the houses that learn to love dullness. Your cards become decorations. This is reform's nicest mood. The surgeon closes the day the way he likes, with a bowl that smells of clean and not of theater. Bowl hot, water cool, don't rub, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later, comfrey once heat sleeps. Names learned. He traces the sentences with a finger that likes counting more than cursing. He writes a last entry. Debt renamed receipt. He blows out the horn lamp with the same mouth he used to announce emergencies and prefers this quiet. He pins a copy of the thanks page next to the door because leaving is also a liturgy. You finish part 3 the same way you began part 1 and part 2, by hanging sentences where wrists live. The forge sleeps with apron tied pinned above it and slack tub covered strapped like a lullaby. The anvil glows with the tiny polish of a day without drama. The boy breathes in his coin of memory and does not admire it. The master sits without explanation. The herb wife locks her honey as if it were scripture, which it is. The horn lamp coins the last circle you need today. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 4 lands before a clever clerk discovers how to make pain a parade. In the comments, leave your 7-word basin law: cool first, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later, and type continue if you want to walk the steward's lily ledger when sorrow tries to invoice, the guild's scar book when pride requests a stanza, the road's traveling kit for other forges, and the long, boring, beautiful patience that keeps burns from becoming biographies. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the miracle that has outlived 3 crimes now. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths hire drama. The steward's lily ledger is where grief tries to invoice the living, so you set the horn lamp on the trestle until a warm coin of light lands where chalk meets coin and breath refuses to be a receipt. The page smells of wax and barley dust. He has drawn 3 columns that look like mercy disguised as math: names learned, paid, thanks, and 1 blank line under lilies that aches to stay unfilled. You hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise before sorrow hires ceremony. Bowl first, lilies before feasts, witness heard, charge copied, no ordeal talk, guild fund open, thanks collected. The master signs, the herb wife nods, the surgeon warms water because bowls outrun bells. There is no speech large enough to keep accidents away, only drills nailed low enough to steal their audience. The morning's spindle job ambles toward predictability until a lad who owes nothing to tragedy leans in half a breath early to help. A fang of white leaps and writes a blister the size of a coin onto his forearm. He flinches, obeys, because you shouted his future onto the wall before he ever met iron. Don't rub. Bowl hot. Water cool buys the first minute. Honey first buys the second. Vinegar ring teaches heat to stay inside the border you drew. Ash waits like a well-raised cousin for the moment when usefulness is not performance. The surgeon hums the road chorus, board, loop, peg, cap, move, to calm himself. The boy's breath returns to the room. The steward does not open the lily ledger. He writes thanks instead. You carry that coin of rescue to the guild room along with a new page in the scar book. This is not the brag tome elders craved. It is the grammar they wish they had owned younger. Where? Horn. When orange. Why? Help before thinking. Rule. Tongs kept. Response. Cool. Honey vinegar. No ash yet. Later. Comfrey wraps 2 nights. Thanks. Herb wife. Surgeon. Bellows steadiers. Pride requests a stanza. The elder turns the page and prints receipts instead. He copies your mouth height rules into the minutes and admits, without bowing, that vulgar sentences made the right men older. The road outside smells of iron fares and farriers' carts, a traveling hazard that keeps apprentices famous for the wrong reasons. You build a kit small enough to tie to a barrow and dull enough to beat knives, horn lamp, a sheaf of cards drilled for tacks, a slate for time posted, a vinegar flask, a honey pot wrapped in linen, a pouch of sifted ash, a roll of cool cloth, a half-dozen nails stamped weight. You call it the Steal Me Pack and leave it visible. Every town that takes one pays with safety faster than it would with admiration. At the first fair you arrive to find a festival smith staging miracles for coins. Iron in white, water in cinema, spectators in sandals. You push horn into the splash zone and nail the simplest spells where wrists must read them to earn a blister. Apron tied, cuffs shut, no bare feet, tongues kept, cool first, no water under oil. 2 boys snort, the beetle taps the trestle, the crowd moves back a cart length. The smith reheats to orange and calls it craft instead of theater. A child reaches for bright and collides with no hand on red. His mother laughs. Relief will do that to a person and buys the card for her own hearth. You do not call that evangelism. You call it resale. In the inn yard that night, heat tries its oldest trick, oil upset over flame, and you discover why you drilled no water under oil into timber until even champions of recklessness could recite it backwards. The lad at the bucket freezes, then throws ash instead of water because your card scraped his knuckles last week. The flame flatters itself and dies. The keeper grips the beam, breathes, pins cool first, cover sparks over the scullery door, and whispers to the slate, "Thanks." A traveling poet watches and decides to earn his coppers with a song about lids. The priory's infirmary becomes your favorite blasphemy, a herb wall shaped like liturgy. You hammer honey allowed on Sundays onto the door and let doctrine learn chemistry. Comfrey will have its day later. Now is for sweetness insisting. The prior, smaller on purpose, copies your basin rules into a margin between psalms and confesses that his monks enjoy writing names learned beside ordinary people's hands more than noting grand altar donors. Saints like keeping bowls hot. Prevention goes domestic when you start posting shop law onto kitchens. No bare feet lands by thresholds where nails wait. Apron tide sits at eye level over peels. Cool first hangs above every pail. Cover sparks nails itself to the scrub post like a new religion. Women do not ask permission to become guild sisters of dullness. They buy the herb wife's wreaths, forged nails twisted with comfrey, and pin your cards under them like house charms that reduce funerals. The steward's lily ledger proves itself the way you meant it to, by staying mostly closed. But sorrow tries anyway. A tinker's rag catches, he hesitates, a stubborn spark writes too fast. The surgeon and herb wife purchase the first hour with their bowl, the steward purchases the next day with coin, the guild purchases the next month by marking honey fund, paid in the minutes. The elder who once sneered at vulgarity signs his name beneath thy thanks with genuine relief. This is how you bankrupt pain, by paying its first invoice before it can become a songbook. Debt attempts a coup by arriving dressed as honor. A baron's man demands proof of courage, bare forearms at the anvil for a visiting duke. You set horn on the bench until the coin of light stains his wrists. The master hands the duke an apron that smells of hinges, cuffs shut, borrows velvet's pride, and sells it back as adulthood. The duke draws a heat, returns it shy of orange, and finds himself remarkably alive. He overpays for honey with the face of a man who hasn't lost an argument in a while. You do not tell the story later. You sell another card. The apprentice's burn coin stops speaking loud and starts keeping minutes. He asks to run bellows, the way boys ask to climb proofs. You print bellows steady onto the lever where his hand must bruise it and go and go and go. The shop's micro silence hour starts to feel extravagant. A quarter glass every day when no iron leaves the fire and apprentices touch only water, linen, buckles. Iron forgives people who schedule humility. Between heats, you present the scar book to a circle of men who once used scars as rent. One reads reached and hears the anvil horn rapped once. One reads wiped and admits his hand is a thief. One reads rushed and blushes so late you want to hold him. You don't. You point to the card over the basin. He reads it. He ties his children's cuffs tighter at home. Reform is always colonial when it ignores domestic wrists. Your forge lends its grammar to roads by becoming a staging post for other men's kit. You chalk a board labeled "Steal Me" and leave a sheaf of cards, a pot of honey, a bottle of vinegar, a ring of nails, a scrap of linen, and a rule scroll children can shout. Carters arrive with iron problems, they leave with prevention. They drop coins into the thanks jar and tie your law to tailboards. The Guild Minute Book grows a map made of other people's survival. It looks better than banners. The Gale door becomes your last redemption chore. The keeper, who once enjoyed exceptions, reads time posted out loud. 2 wives arrive when the chalk said they could. One brings stew, one brings a copy. Both leave with husbands whose wrists now know how to live through more years. The keeper shows you a sentence he printed without permission, no ordeal talk, and grins like a man who learned to love being furniture. You do not make a speech. You carry the tub back to the forge. There are men who ask whether burns build character. You point them to the bellows and sell them a day of steady. You point them to the herb wall and sell them a wreath instead of a stanza. You point them to the steward's ledger and sell them lilies before meat. You point them to the boy's wrist and sell them silence. Character is what you build when embarrassment is cheaper than applause. Mid-rack, it's your turn. In the comments, write the 7-word traveling forge rule you'll actually nail to a fair barrow. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongs kept, quench clear. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 5 lands before some duke's cousin convinces a festival smith that white heat earns coins. You end the week where you began this work, at mouth height. You thump the anvil horn, 1 rap for cuffs shut, 2 for apron tied, 3 for no bare feet. You point to the quench and say clear. You open honey and vinegar while the bowl warms. You sift ash and hang comfrey on its peg for later. The steward closes the lily ledger without writing in it. The herb wife pins thanks above her bench. The surgeon snuffs the horn lamp with a breath that says not today. The apprentice raps the horn once for you to teach the room your own rule. Wait. The forge sleeps with the slack tub covered and the cards shining in their low positions like stars crude men can use. The street carries your grammar into kitchens. The road steals your kit. The guild minutes grow longer under thanks than charges. The scar book becomes a map of verbs wiser than pride. The lily ledger remains thin. Snow will come and men will still forget, but they will forget less often and less dangerously because you hung sentences where wrists live. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 5 arrives before winter tempts some poet to pour water on oil. In the comments, leave your 7-word rule you will nail where a stranger's hand will strike first. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongs kept, quench clear, and type. Continue if you want me to carry this into the castle armory when procurement tries to underfund lugs, the charcoal pits where pitch remembers skin, the roadsmiths who cook danger for applause, and the long apprenticeship that keeps scars from becoming philosophies. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the one instrument that beat pillories, bore, and gossip for the same reason, public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths invite fire. The castle armory smells like ambition in a room, so you set the horn lamp on the contracts table until a warm coin of light lands where quills would rather worship savings than wrists. A chest of rivets sits open like a boast. A scribe presents a neat roll, efficiencies that reads like future scars. A steward with silk ties around his mouth praises lances because lugs are unsightly. You hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise before titles rename danger, spears with lugs and guards, guards tied, no lances for bore, aprons, wool or leather, not linen, slack tub covered, quench clear, no water under oil, vinegar, honey, ash stalked, bellows steady, no white heat tricks. The master touches each line with 2 fingers like a vow. The scribe smirks, the steward frowns, the herb wife opens her basket like a quiet argument the budget will lose. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that brings drills, not efficiencies. And in the comments, give me your 7-word armory law you'd actually nail above this table. Lugs required, guards tied, aprons wool, quench clear. I'll pin the plainest one and carry it to the next castle where ink is cheaper than skin. Procurement always tries to make bravery affordable. The scribe points at his roll. Thinner aprons, fewer lugs, demonstration quench barrels that save water by keeping oil floating on a secret. You slide horn over the paragraph like a slow knife until the letters look embarrassed by their own arithmetic. Aprons, wool or leather, not linen, is written larger than dignity. He calls it vulgar. You call it memory. You flip to the page on lances and let the light coin the distance that would carry a boar up a shaft into a boy. No lances for boar goes up where dukes must bruise it with their gloves to reach their pens. The steward says tradition. The armorer says funerals. Guess who wins? The order list is a map of future burns if you let Price write it. Cauldrons for pitch, pots for oil, braziers for rivets, a stack of new slack tubs, bellows leathers. You pin cards to each item at mouth height, the only height policy ever worked at. Pitch pot, no water under oil, ash at hand, sand stored. Rivet brazier, apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept. Slack tub covered, no lad accidentally baptized. Bellows steady, no fashion for bursts. A page tests your patience by leaning over the quench to admire his reflection. The armorer raps the rim with a tongue, 1, 2, 3, like a forge's silence hour, and the boy steps back, grinning the grin that pays surgeons before they are needed. Boredom begins to feel like rank. Charcoal burners arrive with their own weather. Pits ring the outer bailey like patient volcanoes. Pitch barrels sweat. Yard tricks appear the moment a crowd does. White heat, sleight of hand quenches, oil over water to make steam impressive. You hammer a rule board into the fence where wrists must bruise it before Bragg hires them. No white heat tricks, cool first, cover sparks, sand, ash, lid ready. No children in the circle, pitch pots off the fire. A burner laughs, demonstrates anyway, and pours a spit of oil over hidden water. The blast lifts hats without killing anyone, because ash and lid move first. The laughter dies, replaced by the sober sound of a steward writing thanks into the guild minutes. The burner signs a receipt for ash the way a priest signs for bread. Miracles are just chores done at the correct speed. The roadsmiths who travel with fares roll into the castle yard to apply for contracts. Their shows sell fearless tempering and lances reborn. You set horn on the tailboard, nail your small cards along the plank at mouth height, and make them read their own rescue before a single coin moves. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear, no white heat tricks, lugs fitted, guards tied. The canniest of them pockets your rule set as if he meant to steal with virtue. Good theft remains our favorite apostle. He returns at dusk with a spearhead lugged and a guard stitched, proud of having disappointed a duke. The guild delegation arrives with 2 ledgers, Scarbook and Thanks. You put horn on both as if pages were skin. The elder who once sneered at vulgar signs now reads entries in present tense. Where, when, why, rule, response, later, thanks. A new line catches your eye. The steward wrote it without asking you. Lily Fund opened. He covered yesterday's bowl without begging. That is the key to bankrupting pain. Buy the first hours so memory can be a paragraph, not a career. The ledger of thanks overtakes charges by half a page. Pride, properly tied to receipts, begins to taste like soup. Meanwhile, pitch has its own theology. It clings to men who arrive with haste. A co-opper's boy hauls a hot hoop, slips, baptizes his thigh in something that believed itself a sermon. Your rule board rehearses in the order you designed it. Cool first, water poured low, not flung. Honey first, thick enough to insult fire. Vinegar ring, stopping heat where it plots. Ash later, only when the hiss gives up. Comfrey once heat sleeps, knitting under linen while wages happen. The surgeon murmurs the road chorus so his hands remember rails. The herb wife hums the forge alphabet so the boy remembers later exists. The steward writes paid beside the boy's name before pride can sell it on credit. The crowd learns that compassion has choreography. Apprentices memorize the steps. Dukes always try again. This one brings a traveling physician with a Latin argument against honey. You hand him a spoon and a ledger. He frowns, tastes, reads outcomes under horn, infection avoided, scar shallow, work resumed, and discovers he likes chemistry when it pays rent. He writes Mellis Licentia, permission for honey, into a margin, and takes the policy home like a convert. You sell him extra cards for the infirmary, which is to say for his pride. The armorer wages an elegant war against procurement. He lays out lugs pinned, guards tied, receipts kept. Then the lance heads he will grind into rain plates when the steward finishes losing this round of fashion. You hang a new card over the bench that saves more shirts than any saint. No bare forearms in the yard. Pages hate it until they live through winter. Your job is to outlive poems. Apprenticeships become less about mystique and more about schedule. You staple a quarter-glass silence hour into the armory. Bellows steady, no bar leaves the fire. Apprentices touch water, linen, buckles, and watch arrogance shrink the way white heat does when steady air refuses to court it. The bellows man runs the lever like a rosary. He saves as many lives with rhythm as any physician with words. The herb wife grows a wall that looks like faith but isn't. Comfrey, yarrow, plantain, mint, a bitterness for humility. She tacks garden sewn for wounds above the door and sends wreaths, forged nails twined with leaves, to shops that hung your cards without being begged. Villagers begin hanging prevention like saints. Saints do not mind. They approve when walls keep bowls from pretending to be miracles. The gale door is where silence enjoys hurting, so you bring your horn there too. Time posted lands on the wicket in letters the keeper cannot solo interpret. Access for spouse sits where love can find it without performing. Charge copied turns hush into paperwork. 2 wives arrive when Chalk said so. One takes a copy. One takes a hand through the hatch. Both leave without hiring rumor. The keeper shows you a sentence he added without permission. No ordeal talk. And grins like a man who prefers pointing to boasting. You give him a wreath. He blushes like a boy. Nothing sells faster than safety you can steal. You set a steal-me shelf in the outer passage with a horn, cards, nails, cloth, honey, vinegar, ash, a mini scroll of verbs children can shout. Cool, honey, ring, ash, later, wait, and a note, pay with lilies or with silence. Carts stop, hands take. Towns you will never see will outlive men you would not have liked. You are pleased. The charcoal pits at the edge of the wood cough up the season's last hazard. Tar kettles breathe like animals. Boys cluster. A showman hypes fearless pitch. You nail pitch pots off the fire. Sand at hand, ash ready, no children in the circle to the paling, and stand there until boredom replaces admiration. A pot spits at nobody and sulks with the lid on. The crowd buys bread. You call that a perfect performance. Armory contracts close with a miracle older than steel. The steward posts receipts kept under horn. He pays guards, not gestures. Lugs, not poems. Aprons of wool, not linen cut thin for flattering forearms. Slack tubs with lids, vinegar and honey by the sensible measure, ash by the basket, wreaths for every door that hung your cards. He keeps no lances for boar pinned above his pride like useful shame. The Duke's cousin mutters about glory. The steward points at thanks. Money shrugs in the correct direction. Mid-bench, your turn again. In the comments, give me the 7-word armory rule you will nail above any contract desk. Lugs required, guards tied, aprons wool, quench clear, and tap the bell so part 6 lands before some poet persuades a fair smith to boil oil because applause is warm. The weekends where burns become biographies or footnotes. You make them footnotes. The apprentice's coin is pale and well-behaved under linen. He asks for bellows, you give him rhythm. He learns that patience is the most expensive tool the guild owns, and it's free to anyone who practices. The herb wife records honey used and names learned in a hand the elder now imitates. The surgeon writes debt renamed receipt at the bottom of the day's page and blows out your lamp without ceremony. The armorer locks a chest of lugs that will keep men uninteresting enough to live through spring. The steward scratches a line under lilies, none, and goes home quietly. You leave the castle with the only thing you ever mean to leave anywhere, sentences where wrists live. Over the contract bench, lugs required, guards tied, no lances. Over the quench, clear, no water under oil. Over pitch, pots off fire, sand and ash. Over the bellows, steady. Over the door, apron tied, cuffs shut, no bare forearms. In the yard, no white heat tricks. Beside the herb wall, honey allowed. In the gale, time posted, access for spouse, charge copied. On the steal-me shelf, cool, honey, ring, ash, later, wait. Subscribe and tap the bell, so part 6 arrives before winter tempts a procurement roll to swap lugs for lyric. In the comments, leave the 7-word rule you will actually nail where a stranger's hand will strike first. Lugs required, guards tied, aprons wool, quench clear, and type. Continue if you want me to go with you into the pits where pitch pays for roofs and regrets, the road where trick smiths still sell white heat to applause, the guild where thanks keeps growing faster than charges, and the quiet long patience that lets scars remain sentences instead of careers. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the miracle you've seen work at roads, pillories, hunts, and forges. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths rent skin. The tar pits smoke like patient volcanoes at the forest edge, so you set the horn lamp on the paling until a warm coin of light lands where pitch keeps auditioning for miracle and regret. The clamps grip stave hoops like old teeth. The cauldrons breathe as if each exhale ought to be a proverb. Boys hover at the fence the way stories do, too near. You hang counsel at mouth height, where wrists must bruise before mouths consent to applause. Pots off fire, sand at hand, ash ready, lids close, no children in the circle. Cool first, no water under oil, apron tied, cuffs shut. The charcoal man who likes an audience smirks until the beetle's daughter taps the rail with the beetle. Wood hums, admiration cools. Pitch pays roofs and memories. The cooper's shop needs barrels that don't scald for their honesty. You walk the circle the way you walked the forge, rules pinned at the heights bodies actually live. At eye, no white heat tricks. At chest, apron tied, cuffs shut. At hip, no bare feet. The burner, eager to demonstrate fearless tempering, coaxes his pot toward white while a boy teeters with water. You lift the horn. He sees the lamp's coin on his own hands and stops being interesting. The pot comes off. The lid goes on. Sand walks where courage wanted to walk. Ash leans where panic would have been hired. The crowd exhales and discovers boredom is appetizing. When pitch spits, it writes with glue. A lad's shin gets baptized by a bright syllable the size of a walnut. Everyone shouts what they were taught by fear, not by craft. Pull, peel, wipe. You point at the card and make the hand a country with borders. Cool first, water ladled low, not flung. Honey first, thick sweetness building a shield between skin and tar. Vinegar ring, heat arrested, ash later, only when hiss has retired. Comfrey once heat sleeps, not yet. The herb wife steals tallow from the cook's bench and paints around the pitch once cooling allows, loosening glue without inviting flame, then lets the surgeon decide the inch beyond honey. Later, not now, she says, the sentence that saved 3 trades this year. The boy cries ugly and leaves with enough leg to detest theater forever. Roadsmiths still sell danger for the price of attention. Their wagons rattle into the pit yard with painted boards, white heat sonnets, fearless quench, flying scale. You set horn on their tailboard and nail your sheaf of small cards where their wrists must brush them before their mouths can hire themselves. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear. No white heat tricks, lids close, pots off fire. One reads, pockets, steals your grammar on purpose. He returns at dusk with guards stitched to a spearhead and lugs pinned to a future, proud of having disappointed a duke. Politely, the armorer wages his quiet war against procurement by laying out receipts. Lugs pinned, guards tied, aprons wool, slack tubs with lids, bellows leathers paid for like dignity, vinegar and honey stocked like policy. He tacks a card over the bench because nobles keep trying to rent fashion to physics, no lances for bore. Pages grip quills and bruise this sentence before they will ever bruise an anvil. Your reward is not their obedience. It is the way their wrists begin to outvote their mouths. Pitch finds households faster than sermons do. You take your steal-me pack down the lane. Horn, cards, nails, cloth, honey, vinegar, ash, a scroll of verbs a child can shout in rain, and leave one on every fence where a scullery smokes too eagerly. Women nail cool first where water lives, cover sparks near peels. No water under oil above pans because winter loves theater. No bare feet beside thresholds where nails wait. The herb wife plates forged nails with comfrey into wreaths, and the cards hang under them like house charms that reduce funerals. Saints do not mind when prevention looks like piety. The steward's lily ledger stays mostly shut the way you meant, but sorrow tries one invoice anyway. A roofer's sleeve catches, a cousin shouts, a clod of ash refuses to be slower than panic. The bowl wins the first hour, cool, then honey, then vinegar, ash later. The ledger wins the first day, honey fund paid. The guild wins the week, thanks posted, debt renamed receipt. The elder who once called your rules vulgar signs thanks without performative suffering. He likes living more than he likes original sin. Children convert ritual faster than dukes do. They carry the witness book from pit to forge to armory to gale to guild, collecting signatures that rhyme with restraint. Pots lidded, sand used, ash ready, scale kneels, lily fund open, time posted. They make a game of wrapping boards where rules live, the stool crosspiece, the pillory beam, the anvil horn, and shout the verbs in chorus. Cool, honey, ring, ash, later, wait. Mothers hum it as they tie cuffs. Fathers copy it by accident while pretending to read. This is how cultures happen, by games with correct outcomes. Dukes remain tourists in other people's lives. One brings a visiting alchemist with a scroll claiming honey is superstition. You hand him a spoon, a ledger, and a wall of names. He tastes, reads, blushes through Latin, and writes Melis Licentia into a margin with the humility of a man who was not born to it. You sell him 3 cards and a wreath and tell him the price is to hang them where wrists live. He intends to do so. His steward will try to invent exceptions. Your grammar will win more than it loses. The gale door is where hush pretends to be necessary. You bring the horn there too. Time posted. Chalked where tired people make plans. Access for spouse, hung like a yoke over love so resentment will not become a career. Charge copied, the paragraph that cancels whisper. No ordeal talk, the sentence the keeper added without permission because he learned to love pointing. 2 wives arrive with bowls. One leaves a copy pinned to her lintel like a charm. The other leaves a rumor broken into administrative work. Both sleep in the correct beds. The Guild Minute Book keeps outrunning its own old reputation. Thanks grows a fuller page than charges again. The carpenter writes for ash loaned for neighbor fires. The cooper lists lids placed before applause. The brewer says no water under oil 3 times in his own hand. The fishwife thanks the boy who said enough quietly and carried water without inventing song. A physician from a further parish steals your forms boldly. His theft is worship. Fair smiths test your patience with a flourish named Steam Angel. You cut the audience's feet away with a fence and a card. No children in the circle. You smother white heat with your disciplined charity. Lids, sand, ash. The angel declines to appear. The crowd decides they prefer pies. A minstrel writes a new chorus to a dull beat. Pots off fire, sand near hand, ash in pail, lid to plan. It pays better than the old tunes. In the castle yard, you inherit a procurement roll that swapped wool aprons for linen and called it thrift. The armorer piles the linen in a chest labeled rag, not armor, and posts apron's wool in a hand even dukes can read. He chains lids to pitch pots. He locks a chest of lugs like winter oats. He has become patient and contagious. The steward loses the argument gracefully because die. Thanks keeps rewarding him for the correct vices. The herb wall answers bowls by becoming ambitious. Comfrey leaf after heat sleeps. Yarrow flowers where knives tried to work. Plantain humbles nettles. Mint convinces panic to taste stupid. You nail honey allowed on Sundays where the prior can see it without ripping scripture. He writes it into a margin and keeps his afternoon. Honey first, vinegar ring, ash later. Comfrey once heat sleeps. Liturgies that keep hands are the only ones towns can afford. Burn boasting is the last dragon. You hang no ordeal talk over the armory bench and at the forge rack and on the pit paling because romance is stubborn. When some cousin says, scars are tuition, you hand him bellows for a day. When he says pain builds character, you give him lids and sand during fair day. When he mumbles, honey is softness, you sell him a spoon. Nothing ruins a bad philosophy faster than chores. Mid-paling, now you leave in the comments the 7-word pit rule you'll actually nail to a tar fence. Pots off fire, sand ready, no water. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 7 lands before winter convinces a poet to light oil to hear applause. You close the week the same way you saved it, by hanging patience where wrists live. Over the pits, pots off fire, sand at hand, ash ready, lids close. Over the quench, clear, no water under oil. Over the bench, apron tied, cuffs shut, no bare forearms. Over the bellows, steady. Over the herb trough, honey allowed, comfrey later. Over the gale wicket, time posted, access for spouse, charge copied. On the steal me shelf, a card a child can shout and a wreath any kitchen can own. The steward looks at the lily ledger, doesn't open it, and writes thanks somewhere else. The armorer trims another lance head into a rain plate without narrative. The herb wife refills honey without apology. The surgeon warms the bowl and yawns because quiet pays. The apprentice raps the anvil horn once, not to warn, just to say wait, and the room obeys. The beadle's daughter taps the rail and the pits hum like stoves that finally agreed to be furniture. Oak answers the beam when you thump it. Boredom wins again. This is how lifelong scars stopped being inevitable stories and started being preventable footnotes, by tying pride to aprons and rules to wrists, by moving honey ahead of hymns, by pinning verbs where hands bump them, by funding lilies before meat, by preferring thanks to charges, by making theft of your kit the county's favorite charity, by lengthening attention to the exact size of safety. If you want the last part of this build, scar books that travel, lily funds that exist without shock, pitch pits that hire lids first, and apprentices who become elders without selling pain. Subscribe and tap the bell. Then leave 2 gifts in the comments: your 7-word traveling pit rule, pots off fire, sand ready, no water, and the word continue, so I bring horn chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the one miracle that refused to flatter any century: public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths rent skin. The county learns faster than pride, so you set the horn lamp on the milepost outside the first town that was not yours, and let a warm coin of light land where strangers' wrists will bump it before their mouths can invent another poem about bravery. On one side of the post hangs a forge card, on the other, a road card. Below them, a small wreath of forged nails plated with comfrey, so there is no confusion about which saints you serve. You hang counsel at mouth height because nothing else has ever worked. Apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear, no water under oil, pots off fire, sand and ash at hand, lids close, bowl hot, water cool, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later, comfrey once heat sleeps. A carter traces the words with his forefinger like a thief discovering a prayer he can keep. The kit that made this season possible travels better than you do. You pile the steal me shelf with what made honey stronger than hymns: horn, cards drilled for tacks, a wreath, a ladle, a pot of honey wrapped in cloth, a bottle of vinegar, a bag of sifted ash, a folded set of cool linen, and the children's rule scroll that fits any town's mouth: cool honey, ring ash, later, wait. People take one thing, or 3, or everything. They leave coins or lilies, or just a nod you have learned to accept as rent. Your reform survives because it can be stolen. Scar books begin to appear without your handwriting. In the next market, you find one on the smith's rack you've never touched. Where? Quench. When? Orange. Why? Rushed. Rule, wait. Response: cool, honey, ring. Later, comfrey. The elder who used to perform scars for status reads the page and decides to prefer being boring to being admired. He signs where the book asks for thanks, not for recurrence. Apprentices read the verbs, not the swagger, and leave with wrists that plan to live. The lily ledger keeps refusing to open. Where it does, it opens politely. One widow's lilies were paid by the Lily Fund before gossip could build dignity. The surgeon's bowl was kept hot by receipts instead of grief. The herb wall stayed ordinary because comfrey learned to wait. The steward, who now points more than pleads, posts Lily Fund open under horn, where people can bruise it with coins the way they used to bruise benches with stones. He is not a better man than last winter. He is a man who learned to love furniture. Procurement tries once more, as it always will. A new roll arrives with thinner aprons, fewer lids, spectator barrel for demonstrations, and a euphemism for lance heads in reserve. You set horn on the parchment until the ink looks nervous. Aprons, wool or leather, not linen, goes back up on the armory wall, large enough for page and duke alike. No lances for boar lives, where the steward must bruise it daily. Pots off fire, lids close. No white heat tricks returns to the tar fence where boys lean. The man who sold efficiencies collects his purse and finds gavta, thanks instead of contract. Even bad plans can learn shame. Traveling fair smiths adapt because money prefers safety. Their tailboards now carry your tiny posters like pennants: apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear, lids close. Some perfected an encore you enjoy. After a safe show, they hang a wreath on a neighbor's door. They call the gesture advertising. You call it muscle memory. Dukes still grumble that lugs are ugly. You still sell them rein plates made from lance heads. Regret, reforged, pulls someone home. The Gale door invents a calendar of kindness you never thought to request. Time posted at 2 heights, one for tired eyes, one for tired wrists. Keeps love punctual. Access for spouse drapes like a yoke above the hatch, so resentment will not metastasize. Charge copied lies waiting like bread. When envy returns disguised as ordeal, the keeper taps no ordeal talk like the bellows man tapping steady. It is easier to be decent when pointing is permitted. Feast banners stop auditioning as bailiffs, mostly because the priest has fallen in love with his own smallness. He pins no anonymous posting beside bans with a tenderness that belongs to people who finally prefer useful hymns to pretty lies. The porch becomes the corridor where saints and sentence share the same air. Children carry copies given to women without pushing. Men wait their turn to be told when to be quiet. Lateran has an accent now. Your grammar. The herb wall starts taking visitors the way churches take pilgrims. People want to see the place where pain was told to become paperwork. The herb wife keeps a bowl of water steaming like a promise. The surgeon keeps honey in reach like doctrine. Both keep a chart with your sentences in the same order that worked everywhere. Cool first, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later, comfrey once heat sleeps. They tell everyone the secret that never stopped being a secret. Respect is just attention, repeated long enough to replace adrenaline. Children memorize. You teach them to rap the anvil horn once for cuffs, twice for apron, thrice for shoes. To tap the stool crosspiece with the beetle when the dipper says enough, to pat the fence where no children in the circle hangs, to shout wait into pride, to sing the road chorus, board, loop, peg, cap, move, when their feet itch to admire themselves. This is how longevity defeats legend, by turning the correct sound into a game. The last resistance is always aesthetic. Some cousin argues that scars give faces character and towns permission to mourn well. You hand him lids, sand, ash, bellows, and the scarf that says apron tied, then book him for a day of practice. By evening he regards his own hands the way a man regards a door he just hung plumb. I see, he says without poetry. You do not applaud. You give him a wreath and a nail and ask him to maintain someone else's sign. A physician with an admirable hat copies your documents with the seriousness previously reserved for Latin. He takes scar book and thanks and lily ledger formats back to his city. He sends word a month later that thanks outpaced charges for the first time since anyone bothered counting. He encloses a donation to your steal me shelf. You pin his letter under horn where strangers will bump it before they lift their voices. At a winter fair, 2 carts collide near the pitch circle. This would have become a ballad last year. Instead, it becomes a page. Cool first, ladles low and steady, honey first, slow and thick, vinegar ring, heat corralled, ash later, only when the hiss goes quiet, comfrey, folded for later, not now. The steward writes paid by the names of hands, the guild writes thanks by the names of chores, the elder who once sneered at vulgarity runs the bellows for the smith because steady air is dignity. The rhymers sell a jig about lids. Scar books begin to list verbs you never taught. Returned, stayed, read, copied, witnessed. The steward's lily ledger grows short margins where he writes prayers no one will read. The armorer's chest holds more lugs than arguments. The herb wall, which once made monks flinch, becomes the county's favorite place to say the word later out loud. This is how decades turn. Not by miracles, but by nouns hung low and verbs rehearsed under lamplight. You walk the loop one last time, forge, pit, armory, galed, porch, square, and do the thing that has replaced every speech you were asked to give this season. You hang sentences where wrists live. Over the quench, clear, no water under oil. Over the fire, no white heat tricks. Over the bench, apron tied, cuffs shut, no bare forearms. Above the pit, pots off fire, sand and ash at hand, lids close. On the gale, time posted, access for spouse, charge copied. On the guild post, weights sealed, witness welcome, return paid. On the bands board, no anonymous posting, names learned. On the steal me shelf, cool honey ring ash later wait. What did Blacksmith Burns teach the county in the end? That pain is not tuition. It is a bill you can prevent strangers from owing when you make policy touchable. That honey beats him, that vinegar beats rumor, that ash is a cousin best invited late, that comfrey is a word for after, that the worthwhile liturgy is a bowl in a room where names are learned and lilies are paid. that boredom is a virtue, that thanks pays faster than grief, that the fastest way to change a century is to write its useful verbs where children can hit them. Before we pack this kit and shoulder it toward the next argument that pretends to be fate, I need exactly 2 favors from you. Subscribe and tap the bell so our next 7-part drill lands while your beam still remembers its height. And in the comments, leave 2 gifts for the square you'll never see but will save anyway. Your own 7-word public rule you will actually nail at hand level. Cool first, honey first, vinegar ring, ash later, and the next theme title you want hammered into drills under horn. Try one of these, or write the one your street knows it needs. How parish bells outran gossip, why city walls ate generals, what market stalls taught ministers. We will shoulder horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, the wreaths people earned, and the only miracle you should keep believing in, public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths rent skin.